Hello. So, a lot of people, when they try to summarize or boil down what sixes is, they tend to talk about sixes in terms of advantages and disadvantages, or rather say that it's about advantages and disadvantages, which makes sense with like Uber ad, player ad, and all the pushes surrounding those. Um, I kind of disagree though, and I think that it is largely a game about space and controlling space, and you use your advantages and disadvantages to convert into space. And you win when you control all of the map and cap their last, right? Um, and that's kind of what I was going to talk about today. I actually just recorded like 30 minutes, probably more like 20, of what was going to be this video where I was talking about player ad and how to play off of that. And then I realized I was actually really just recording a video about what pressuring means. And I think that's a more focused topic, honestly. So I'm going to just go with that in this retry. So yeah, pressure. It's a word that gets thrown around a lot. And a lot of teams will just kind of say like, okay, let's pressure. Or we have a pick, we should pressure. We have 2 picks, we should pressure. Or let's pressure last for our sack. And these all do kind of mean the same thing, but it's never exactly clear. So first and foremost, what is pressure? I have a few things noted down here. I guess the most straightforward definition for what pressure is it's aggressive positioning and spam. At its most basic level, that's what pressure is. It's you taking some aggressive space in order to spam the other team, typically in a stalemate. Typically when both teams have a hold on the point. In transition, it's more so about like pushes rather than just pressures. But yeah, that's what pressure is. It's kind of like pushing the envelope in a sense, just seeing what you can get. And yeah, like in the literal word, like applying pressure to the team. See if anything breaks, build up that tension, stuff like that. Another couple things I said, making opponents uncomfortable is another thing. Just putting them in a position where they are threatened of, or under the threat of being overwhelmed from either multiple different doorways or just aggressive spam, or the other team taking space, any number of things. Likewise, it should be pretty non-committal. For reasons I'll talk about later. First and foremost, it's very important not to be dying for pressure because pressure is not meant to be a committed option. It's meant to be leading into other potentially committed options and make those options as strong as possible. It is an accessory to an actual plan. It kind of takes the form of a plan, as in like teams decide to pressure, but pressure in and of itself is not going to accomplish things necessarily. And sometimes you need other plans that the pressure leads into, right? And lastly, it's kind of an open-ended question, which I've sort of been alluding to here, where you're not sure exactly what you're going to get with pressure. It's a matter, you have to see what you get with the pressure, right? So a big aspect of pressuring is being flexible and ready to do any number of plans. Because pressure can turn into really any number of things. It can turn into a dry push, where you just straight up get the point because the other team is overwhelmed by the pressure and they leave. It can turn into an exchange or an attempted exchange from the other team, where they see the easiest way to alleviate the tension and to alleviate being overwhelmed as just taking an exchange, getting the force, maybe buying time for spawners if they're down players, just resetting the situation, right? And it may turn into just a normal sack, right? All of these things are going to depend on not only what you get in the pressure, but also the other team's positioning and space. So let's think of an example here on process. Imagine we are pressuring for a sack because it's even players, even numbers, or excuse me, even numbers, even Ubers. Players and numbers are the same thing. So we, as the team with control of mid, want to pressure versus sack. Since we're the attacking team with control of mid, we can kind of take control of sewer or IT as we see fit. We might even rotate. Let's say we do rotate our beam into sewer here for the pressure. So since the ball is in our court, we're going to initiate pressure. And what happens next is going to depend entirely on the other team's position. 99% of the time, the other team's going to be kind of positioned maybe on side spire, somewhere or thereabouts, right? Their demo might be more forward. They could have, flank wherever, but their beam is going to be, over there roughly. In a case like this, very straightforward pressure. What you're aiming to do as a demo, for instance, is get spam. Maybe their demo's holding the door pretty aggressively. You might want to spam them out. You can spam their scout so that they're less effective at killing or denying your soldier bomb. Or just direct damage on the med, meaning like a soldier bomb is going to be way more successful, because if that med is only 100 HP because I hit them with a 50 damage sticky, then they might die in just one rocket and they are much more likely to use against a bomb. Things like this. Very straightforward, just understanding how the game works and trying to do different things with a very specific intention in mind, right? And I'm thinking specifically about a sack because most of the time when they're in that normal position, that's just what teams do. They pressure and get a sack. But let's imagine, for some inexplicable reason, their beam is all the way back here, right? So a soldier sack is going to be really bad, typically, because their beam is so far back. It's going to be hard to get to them. The scouts are just going to super deny you before you get any damage done. So if you try to just send a sack into that, it's not really going to work. But because their heals are so far away, if their demo is close trying to hold the door, then this guy is super isolated and maybe a pick. If their demo is quite passive with the heals, then all these doors are open and you can just walk it up, take this space, maybe even walk up to platform here. All of these are options. The space is being given to you by the other team, so you may as well take it. You may as well push the envelope, see what you can get there. And that's kind of the importance of pressure, right? Because if you just decide to send a sack, or God forbid, never ever do this, even if you're like a new team, the easiest thing in the world to send your sack is don't just blindly bomb your soldier, and at the very least peek and spam with other classes. They don't have to commit to anything, just literally like peeking a shutter door and getting any type of spam is going to be so much more helpful. But point being, if you were just blindly sending a soldier, then you're not taking advantage of their positioning the way that they're set up, and you're not playing as well as you could be. There might even be cases where you still want to sack, but you want to sack out of that demo. There might be cases where you want to just take the space, and with the space try and maybe bait out an exchange, because the other team realizes like, oh shoot, they're starting to like take good space. They might just like get the point if they continue with this. Med, come with me, let's use. And then you see that happening, you back up out of there, or back up enough that they're overcommitted and you can repop. Like any number of things can happen, and that's why being so flexible in the pressure is important, because all these plans could make sense in different situations, and being able to read a situation and understand based on the other team's positioning what you can get away with is very important. That's why on process some teams will just like pressure choke, for instance, or have their demo pressure choke. That doesn't even matter where the demo is necessarily, because they could come with a combo. Let's say the combo is just pressuring sewer, right? There are some cases where you might just pressure sewer, and kind of that's that, because their beam is close enough that the doors are being pretty well held. But there's other cases where teams will just take like all this space, even up to here, even against a demo that's like this forward, just because sometimes that space is given and you may as well take it. Now of course you can bite off more than you can chew and get too aggressive, and then suddenly like a guy here is getting bombed and dying, or they're taking an exchange, forcing a lot of flashes. It's better for them. So it really is all about finding that fine line of what you can get away with, and pressuring as much as you can, make the other team uncomfortable, and yeah, it should feel like they're kind of gasping for air against really good pressure, right? Okay, so I was talking about kind of an even Ubers, even players situation where the attacking team is just trying to sack. When it comes to no one having any picks, right, even players, what pressure you can get away with, or what to pressure at all, is going to be very point dependent. So in the case of the team having mid, for example, I talked about how IT and sewer you can kind of just take control of at your leisure. If they were full stacking their team in sewer, that would be very like abusable, right? Because you can get through choke, get players behind to like collapse on them. They're just very out of position essentially. Even if they were stacking like their flank in sewer for whatever reason, these two players would be big liabilities. They're not going to be able to hold off an entire team that can rotate into them. So it's not usually something that the defending team, as in the team with two, is going to be able to handle. So because you can take control of those areas, usually with even players, the attacking team is capable of pressuring, right? And then what you get with the pressure is going to depend. On the flip side, the defending team, because they don't really have access to those spaces, it's going to be pretty difficult to pressure without it being very exploitable. So that's why usually the defending team waits for the attacking team to send a sack. And once they get that pick, once they get that player advantage, then they get to pressure, because then they can take control of IT and sewer and such, and then pressure into mid. And usually the best pressure, it's hard for that pressure to materialize too much into anything, which is why teams usually just send a sack in return, which is usually just a counter sack, right? So a lot of the time it will just be a sack, counter sack type of deal. But honestly, like especially in lower divs, I don't think teams are that well equipped to handle pressure, so you can totally get more just out of playing good pressure, playing good positions where you can spam aggressively without being caught, without being necessarily committed and flexible to do whatever you want, right? Now let's talk about a team that has picks, right? Because picks do matter a lot when it comes to pressure, because just being down a player matters a lot in TF2 in general. So first and foremost, it is pretty point dependent. And let's say, for instance, on process last, right? If I'm the attacking team with control of two, I'm more than comfortable to double sack into last. And in fact, most teams tend to double sack into last. Because this point's pretty comfortable to hold down to. You can just have your demo locking down one, and traps wherever else they want as well. If anyone tried to take high ground, either through upper lobby or through two, then the demo is here to just annihilate them. And then, yeah, Pocket Soldier could just be ready to spam this out, spam out anyone trying to bomb, spam out two, and then like a Pocket Scout is ready to just deny any bomber, right? Pretty comfortable hold most of the time. So if I'm the team on last and I have two picks, then I'm not necessarily going to be able to just dry out if it's just a regular soldier and a scout pick, right? I'm not going to be able to get the same type of deep pressure or really aggro, really strong pressure that I would be able to get on, say, a team, well, into last, for instance. If you have two picks into last, then you can absolutely be taking space through a doorway, and even like pressuring point, spam down any sentry gun if it exists, stuff like that. Really strong aggressive ideas with the pressure into last with two picks. Out of last, not so much. So the point does matter. What point you're on matters. And being familiar with how many people tend to get sacked in a point is a good idea. So rule of thumb though, if you're the attacking team, as in the team with control of mid, then typically you don't need any picks at all to pressure. Even players is plenty. And if you have any picks, then you can get even stronger pressure in. And if you are the defending team, then you usually need a pick to pressure for most points. And off of your own last, you usually need more than two to get really good pressure. Of course, you're going to pressure for your counter sack anyway when they're down two or down even just the one guy, but don't expect it to be very strong. It might just be as simple as like, yeah, your demo takes lobby, maybe tries to like land a stick or two on the med, or just whoever might be on point before setting up traps in lobby and leaving, right? Something like that. Which is better than nothing to help your sack, but still. So that's like the basic rule of thumb. But what else is here? I should mention pretty much all the situations I'm talking about are either even Ubers or even disad. it's not add Uber situations, because if you have Uber add, it's just an extremely straightforward situation where you have picks and Uber add. You just basically get to dry the point, whatever point it is. And if the other team is caught to an Uber, then you just use it and catch them. But if they're ready to leave and not caught, then you just get the point, right? Very straightforward. So it's mostly even Uber situations or even disadd. You can totally pressure even if it's disadd, especially when you have multiple picks. There might be some times where, like, yeah, it's only like one pick, especially on, like, for instance, a big point like process mid, where you have to be way out there to be ready to leave. Off of one pick, yeah, you might not want to pressure, but you might be able to get some more aggressive spam as they enter, or get a better sack off. But that's kind of going to be the extent of things, right? But yeah, if it's 2 picks or something, you might be able to totally pressure into second, even if it's disadd. What else? The point matters. We already talked about that. Yeah, so let's talk more about like being flexible with your pressure, right? Because a lot of the time, sure, if it's even players, even numbers, you're expecting to probably sack, but it's a bad idea to stick to plans like hard and fast, right? Because you don't know what their positioning looks like. You don't know what you're going to get with your pressure. So it's very good idea to not go in with just a set plan necessarily, and just go into pressure and see what you get, communicate with your team, and then, you know, you can decide in the moment what you want to do. So if, for instance, you call, so let's say it's a situation where their med is pretty passive, right? You call that their med is passive, and so the roamer, who let's say was planning to bomb through choke, is not just going to bomb now. He's going to wait for the pressure, or maybe even pressure choke himself, like spam a little bit. So let's say you decide to focus the demo with spam, because the demo is kind of forward. Okay, you do that. Let's say demo takes like 80. And let's say their demo is pressured off, and at this point their beam starts to walk forward to heal their demo, right? And let's say you land a stick on the med for like 60 damage, right? That might just be enough damage for your soldier to now send it, knowing that their beam has now walked forward. Or you want to just keep pressuring. That's up to you. You can continue pressuring and see what else you get. Maybe your soldier even wanted to send it on the demo when you got that damage on the demo, right? Point being, any number of these plans can work, and it's just a matter of finding that perfect time where over the course of your pressure, which however many seconds it lasts, there is a theoretical like best time to convert that, if you are just planning to sack. And it's about getting as good pressure as you can, building up that tension, just building up the steam, so that when you do send a sack, if you do, it's going to be as good as possible. And there are going to be cases where they kind of release the tension themselves by either starting to leave or trying to get aggressive for an exchange, right? And I know, like, phrasing it as like you need to find this perfect timing, it kind of it puts a lot of like gravitas on it, like this is a really important decision, but it really is as simple as just see what you can get, and try to get aggressive with it. Once you kind of feel like you're plateauing, right, like you're not really getting that much value anymore, you should probably just rip the band-aid off, send that sack, and just know that that sack is better than it would have been if you sent it without the pressure, right, or with like weaker pressure. And that's like more than adequate. You can be perfectly happy knowing that you at least applied some pressure, you at least built up some tension for your sack, put them in an uncomfortable position, which is really all that it's about at the end of the day. Okay, let's talk more about these picks, right? Because having picks is a big deal. And the go-to plan that teams like to follow when they have picks is just pressure. And yeah, that is very true. Like when you have picks, pressure is a very good idea because you don't know what their hold is going to look like while they're down those players. If you just commit to a dry push or something, that might not be the best option against what they're doing. Versus if you just decide to like send us, well, you wouldn't. I don't know if you'd want to just send a sack off the rip if they're down 2, but in cases that certainly wouldn't be the best option, right? So you want to pressure not only to apply pressure and to put them in that uncomfortable situation, but also to kind of diagnose what's going on and, you know, go with your best option. So if it is, let's say, 2 picks, let's say it's a soldier and a scout into process second, what do you do? Well, you pressure, right? In case you were wondering. But what does that mean? Well, first and foremost, find out what they're doing. If they're super passive on like bats or something, or ready to leave 1, then you can totally just take that space and even just take the point off that. Your demo locks out the doors. Everyone's happy. If they are playing in a normal position, or what would be normal if it was even players, then by all means you can get very aggressive pressure because there are doors certainly not being watched. So let's say they're just down their flank and they're just trying to pretend like they aren't playing normal. Their demo's aggressive, so the combo is not necessarily going to get a ton of space because the demo is locking it down. You can exchange damage with the demo, try and force them off the door, but it would be the same as if they were, if everyone is alive, right? From the combo perspective. But the flank's going to be completely not watched, meaning the flank can absolutely just get through. Like get a scout behind or just straight up bomb a soldier through cleanly, something like that. Put them in this terrible position where they're very likely to force as a result of the door not being watched and taking advantage of that, right? And the pressure is an accessory to that. Likewise, if they're just quite close in a way that it seems clear they're trying to play the exchange, then it's a good idea to not give them that exchange. It's a good idea to try to kite the exchange, bait it out, make it look like the exchange is worth going for, and then the second they use, you're just safe and don't have to use. And if they're just chilling there, which is, I guess, unlikely, then by all means just get through the door, well, get a player through the door that's not being watched and just force them, right? As far as baiting out exchanges go, I've mentioned in my exchanges video the value of being able to drop a demo. If you are not going to have to use Uber in their post fight, right? So not use Uber at all, only use Uber at your leisure at some time in the future, then it's totally worth just dropping your demo to preserve the ad because you can just chill, your demo spawns, and you can just push that point and still have ad for the next point. So overall, that's usually the go-to. If you're going to have to use anyway, or you just want to pop back in because like their Uber is just about to end and you want to catch these players, then yeah, you should be saving your demo. Yeah. So next we're going to talk about like the class that you have a pick on because it does matter a lot if they don't have access to a certain class. So whether you have a demo pick, a medic pick, or both soldiers or both scouts. First, let's talk about the medic. If you have a pick on the med, you should very much seek to play the game much slower and more methodically because any damage you deal is permanent, right? So if we imagine we have a pick on the demo, or excuse me, on the medic, my team into process 2 can just peek, play things slow through sewer. Let's say their demo is on point. Let's say their demo spams me with a stick. I hit him with a stick as well. While the damage trade, we each did the same amount of damage to each other. It strictly favors me because my medic is right here healing me and his medic is dead, unable to heal him. So the longer that interaction goes on, he's either just going to die or have to leave, right? So playing slow and methodically, playing to just chip those opponents, wear them down so they have to leave and you can just take that point off the fact that you have heals and they don't is really important. And this has the added benefit of being less vulnerable to a sellout or a bomb. Because if, for instance, we kill their medic and just dry it through choke and start walking up as if we can just take this space, there might be some random flank member lurking around here. There might be a demo like ready to leave but has enough health to bomb and just decides, okay, let's just sell out. This is a very terrible position to be in against that. And teams without meds are going to be much more likely to sell out and have much less to live for than a team with a living medic. So you have to be aware of that, and playing slow and methodically is a good way to counter that just stupid aggression as well. Or not necessarily stupid, but just nothing to live for, just trying desperately to not be disat anymore type of aggression. So yeah, with a med pick, slow and methodical, just play the spam game better is usually the best way to carry on with that. Next, let's talk about a demo pick. So if you have a demo pick, they of course have no demo, meaning the doors that the demo usually watches aren't being held. So at the very least, you can expect your pressure to entail, or you should try to aim for your pressure to take some type of space, right? Choke is not being held. Sewer is not being held at all. So you can at the very least walk through those doors. Of course, there's no traps. You have to watch out for like soldier bombs or exchanges being taken, but by and large, you're going to get more space than if they didn't have that demo pick. And if they're not giving that space, playing very aggressively, then see that as a weakness, as them out of position and very forcible, and try to play towards that, right? Don't just try and take space as normal. But yeah, very deep pressure at the very least. And yeah, just enjoy the fact that they're down a demo and they just can't spam you out as well. Your pressure is going to be much better. Now, if they're down both soldiers, not only is that 2 picks, but that means they can't bomb you, and that means they are also down spam. Not down demo spam, but the doors that the soldier are typically watching are not being held. One example would be like the 5 door on last. So this would apply even if like they were down 1 soldier. Soldiers typically hold 1 and 2 and 5, with the demo holding by 3, ready to rotate to either. But let's say you just get a pick on their roamer, for instance. You know the roamer tends to hold 5. If you want, if their pocket is still playing 1 and 2, then this door that is normally super locked down by a soldier, right? Like no one's getting through this against a soldier. This is now like pretty free. And you can absolutely take space through it with your pressure, right? And that's very powerful. And that's only 1 soldier, right? Into last. That can be a big deal, getting those players through that door. 2 soldiers on pretty much any point means there's like multiple doors that just aren't being held adequately. That is a big advantage to be able to take, getting space through those doors off the fact that they are not only down multiple players, but those players are the players actually holding the doors. So space is very, very good when they're down 2 soldiers, even better than when they're just down a demo. And if their demo is still trying to hold the doors, that usually means he's kind of forward and pretty vulnerable, I would say. And that could be the next pick to focus down in the pressure. Lastly, let's talk about 2 scouts. Being down 2 scouts is a big deal as well. Not so much for the space taking, but just that kind of cripples the team in general, because scouts are what give medic the scout speed. That's what makes med, fast enough to actually kite around places. And they are also kind of the only class that actively denies soldier bombs. So a team that's trying to play like normal on Process 2 without scouts is very caught to soldier aggression because they have no one to deny the bombs. And they're also kind of incapable of dealing with space being taken. Of course, they have the spam, but if you can get past the spam, then they are not in a position where they can like actively exchange with you, because a wide open point like Process is usually where you'd want to exchange with a scout, and they just don't have scouts to do that. Their med is kind of incapable of going for a good exchange. So yeah, being down scouts is a big deal. Teams are not going to be able to exchange in wide open spaces, and they are not going to be able to really deny any bombs whatsoever, so soldier bombs are going to be very powerful as well, and very good chance of getting the force. Yeah. What else? Let's finish things off on last, and let's actually jump into Sunshine. Cannot type. To talk about pressure into last, right? So, pressuring into last, pretty much anytime you have a pick into last, you're guaranteed to have like strong pressure, bare minimum. because teams really hate being down a player at last. And last has a lot of things at play when it comes to how you pressure and what to take into account. Oh man, got my Secret Saxton. What if I just open this live? See what I get. Or no, that's the stocking ring open. Let's see what paint I get. Very nice. Oh man. Okay. We are gonna go to last. So, last has a lot of things at play. For instance, a little edge bug. Pretty much every last hold should have a sentry gun, and that's something you can spam out with your pressure. Likewise, you can see any number of off classes at last because the spawn's right there. Anyone can switch to any off class at any point. So sniper is a big deal, and sniper is kind of the pressure denying class in a lot of holds. So first and foremost, you might get the amount of pressure you get is going to depend on your picks and depend on the last. So a last point like Sunshine, you can get pressure or like actual space with your pressure left side, even on even players. You do this by spamming out the soldier that's holding the door, and while he's resupplying, you have a window of opportunity to peek the doorway and potentially get value, right? How much time you have is going to depend on how good their hold is, because usually another soldier would rotate to hold that door, and when it's identified that your combo is playing over there, their demo will rotate as well. So how fast those rotates are, how good they are at playing the last hold on evens is going to matter. But if you can get space through this door, then you can totally spam out the gun. And another thing you can take advantage of as well is the point. Because there are going to be some times on Sunshine Last where you play the spam really well or get a lot of space. Let's say actually you have a soldier pick going into this and you're getting deep pressure off the fact that you have that soldier pick. The point is something very powerful to potentially play. Get a scout in to start capping that. Your demo can trap it off from, again, a pressuring but non-committal position where they're ready to leave whenever. And a lot of teams will just force to that straight up. And yeah, being able to play things like an objective or focus spam on a sentry gun before sending a sack or a double sack or something like that. All these things are good objectives of pressure, but you don't necessarily know what you're going to get until you go for it. Because there might be some times where they just have a sniper here, and then guess what? You just don't get to pressure left side. Boo-hoo. They chose the class that just denies that. There might be some times where the extent of your pressure is kind of just like a little bit of somewhat passive spam, just trying to get something. Like, for instance, into, let's say, like a process last. Your demo might not be able to do too much. It's pretty risky to try and peek 4 because their demo can just cut you off through 3. Stuff like that, you might not be able to get too much pressure. But with a pick, suddenly things open up a little bit more. 2 picks, suddenly your team can probably just take space into the point, start trapping off the point, trying to play that, get that force out, or just send a really good sack if they're playing the point correctly. Stuff like this. Point being, pressure is a very flexible plan that you just try to, overwhelm the other team. Let us actually go into another map here. I didn't expect to, because this is like, oops, I should type map. This is like the textbook example. Is Gully Wash pressure cooks. So pressure cooking is a plan teams will go for in Gully, which is basically exactly what I described. On last, teams will pressure multiple doorways at once to either focus spam on a certain player, whether that be a player trying to hold the door or their medic or their demo or really anyone, just focus spam on a specific player, or spam down the gun, or even play the point. Any number of these things can be accomplished by a pressure cook. You don't necessarily know what you're going to get. Of course, if you're going for like a point play or something, you know your player is going for that because they have to go through water first, so you might focus more towards that. But a pressure cook can do any number of things, and it can convert into any number of things, right? So a normal pressure cook setup would be pocket soldier, shutter, demo, launchpad, medic, in lobby. And then a scout should be watching main, making sure no one goes behind, and typically roamer and river. And then flank scout could be the one watching main, or could be going behind water, depending on if the flank scout wants to be going water. And just like in a position where they're ready to sack, I suppose, because this is a last you typically double sack into. So the flank scout can kind of play wherever, depending on where they'd want to sack. But with the pressure cook, you're just aiming to, yeah, just pressure everything I've been describing. And yeah, I mean, nothing else to say about it other than just it being pressure. But yeah, trapping point, spamming the guy off the ring. I came to Gully Wash because it's the very indicative example. A lot of teams are familiar with pressure cooks on Gully Wash instead of just ripping a two-man, actually like pressuring without necessarily knowing even if they're going to sack, let alone when. And many rounds have just been won by like a demo trapping off the point as the scout's in water, and the scout starts pressuring point. Someone drops down to the trap, gets the kill, and things kind of snowball from there. You continue the pressure, focused on picks with the spam, all without necessarily committing yet. And then you commit when you have enough picks. Just focus down the point or focus down picks, do whatever, win the round, right? Or just they straight up cap before they can react. But I say all this to illustrate that Gully Wash is not the only map that you pressure cook on, right? And if you are good enough and coordinated enough with your team, then basically anytime someone's calling to pressure, they're kind of describing the same type of deal as a pressure cook on Gully Wash, where you're not sure exactly what you're going to get, but there's all these different options and all these different objectives and important things at play that you kind of meticulously take advantage of, because a med is more likely to force if they eat some spam, or because a gun is really good at denying sacks and you want to spam them down first, or because you score the round if you pressure cap and you know that they have to send people on the cap, or because you know that a soldier on the ring is the main way to stop the cap and you want to spam that soldier off so you can cap. All these different things have very pointed purposes, very specific reasons why they matter, and the point of a pressure cook on Gully Wash is to try to eliminate those and, you know, just pick apart your opponents, apply that pressure, build that tension, make it feel like they're drowning and they just cannot stand against everything, and then you just, oh, now they're two-manning and we forced and we lose the round because they used add into last afterwards, right? So pretty much every point in the game, some more severe than others, you should approach with this mentality. And on some of them, it's going to be very simple as, you know, this point we just always counter sack, and that's really it. We just peek choke, spam a bit, and counter sack. But it should never be that, even if that's the case 99% of the time, there's going to be that case where the demo is just very passive, and there should be light bulbs going off in your head being like, wait a minute, we're getting space. Suddenly this pressure is going to be better than we were expecting. Maybe we shouldn't send the sack quite yet, and we can get better spam beforehand. Just something as simple as that. I will close things off with a warning here, because I understand that a lot of teams that are new are going to have a tough time with this, because there's a lot of teams that just don't even know when, like, they just don't even think to sack to begin with, let alone pressure for their sack. And especially when players are less experienced on an individual level, it's much easier for someone to bite off more than they can chew and get caught trying to pressure. So playing really strong pressure and really towing that thin line between what is just feeding in and what is playing very aggressively and trying to, you know, pick apart and break your opponent's hold, can be very difficult. So if you are a newer team and you're having a tough time pressuring and you're like consistently losing people, then I would say just like keep it simple. Just kind of try to flow chart like what points you want to just peek a doorway and spam before your sack, based on like how many numbers you have, just simple stuff like that. And then if you have 2 picks, like you get to potentially push And then if you're down 2, you might just have to leave. Just simple stuff to follow is probably better. But keep in mind, there is a better option out there for when you are experienced enough and you can actually learn to pressure, because just pressuring in general is thrown around a lot, and I think it rewards people who like understand the game, right? Because if you understand like what a scout does or what a soldier does, then you can specifically manipulate what the other team, or you can specifically manipulate the other team based on like what they're lacking, whether they're down scouts or down soldiers or something, or maybe they like to put their sentry gun in a certain spot, and then you like do a very specific pressure to counter that stuff. It just definitely rewards the team that understands the game better, and it's also like very it rewards the team that's like very flexible and coordinated. So pressure is kind of what makes good teams really good in stalemates, and part of the reason why if your team is good at stalemates, then you just aren't in stalemates a lot of the time. When people complain about 5CP being like super stalematey and never being able to break a last hold, I don't want to just like call everyone out who has trouble with that, but sometimes it really is just that your team is like not that good, and like learning to pressure better is going to be just a good solution to that. Yeah, hopefully that was useful. And if you think you can coordinate well as a team and pressure, then pressuring is very good, I suppose, is my final thoughts here. So yeah, hopefully that was useful.